Hey guys, in this video, we're going to get into some of the mechanics of starting your own label. Now, in the other video about if you haven't answered these three questions about whether you should start a label or not, go back and watch that video before you continue on. Um, Part of the reason why is it's going to really get into whether you even should have a label. But if you've gone through that, and you've decided, yes, I need to have a label, we're going to talk real quickly and more focus on you having a label for yourself as opposed to building a label business entity for others. So this one, think of this one as more of like your own label. It's designed to promote you and build around you. Okay, so the starting point, we're going to cover a number of different considerations, and each of these are going to be critical for you to really execute well on starting your own label. Many people just, indie artists just jump into this and they think, oh, hey, I talked to a lawyer, I got, my S Corp or whatever, and that's it. Or they say, hey, I talked to my accountant, I got QuickBooks or, whatever. They sort of narrow it down. And what I like to do is kind of go through methodically, like these are sort of the triggers and the check boxes that you need to consider, because I'm an advocate of learning to think differently. I think if you know me and you watch any of my videos or really any of my content anywhere you find it, you'll realize that for me, it's important that you don't just know how to execute a set of instructions to be successful as an indie artist, but that you actually know how to think as a successful business person. That's part of what I want to help impart to you. So we're going to run through some things. And these are all things you should be taking notes, you should be considering if you want to have a successful label. This is not me, cursing what you're trying to build, but it's just not going to be successful if you're not thinking at least about these handful of things, and you're not thinking generally about the topic of how do I make a successful business. So let's jump right in. Number one, you have to know your why, right? And that's part of what I talked about in the other video about these three questions. Don't start a label unless you've answered yes to one of these or more of these questions. Why do you want to start a label? Because a lot of indie artists just jump to, I need a label. I hear people saying, it kind of gives you credibility or whatever their reasons are. You have to understand why you want to start a label. There are reasons that you will come to that have nothing to do with having a label. Ego, you believe a certain set of financial circumstances are going to happen simply because you say, I have a quote label. Whatever it is, if you don't ask the question, why do I want a label? It is more likely to fail. So you have to know why you need a label. What's the label going to do for you? How is it going to help you? How is it going to promote you? How is it going to provide infrastructure or a financial basis or a legal basis for you to be successful? If you don't know that stuff, then it doesn't make sense for you to start a label. But you can, and I'm encouraging you to start a label if you know your why. So start with, I know my why. I know why I need to do this, why it's important, why it's going to help me succeed. Number two, the second thing is, and these are, although I do think starting with why you're going to do something, and actually now that I think about it, Simon Sinek, if you're not familiar, look him up. Great materials, but I think he has a book called Start With Why. But he certainly teaches on the concept and he speaks a lot, and he's an advocate of really understanding why you want to be doing something. So start there. Number two, I started by saying these aren't necessarily in order of priority because I don't think legal is necessarily before finance questions. So a couple of these aren't necessarily in order. I just think these are all things that you have to consider. So legal, we're going to jump into that. I'm a lawyer plus. When you think about legal, you want to think about entity, and we're gonna there's another video where we actually look at the video where we talk about breaking down solo, partnership, S corp, C corp, LLC, and other iterations of entities. But for this, we're not going to go that deep in this particular video. But the point is to say, do I need a legal entity? Now, a lot of people are like, hey, I've talked to lawyers, or I've had a lawyer before. I understand, hey, what are you talking about? I already have a legal entity, because I'm I'm solo. And so, it's actually a business, or I got a DBA. Just think about a couple of things. Number one, a DBA is nothing more than sort of a branded extension of you. It's just an alter ego. It's not a legal entity. So a lot of times people, indie artists will come to me and say, hey, I got a DBA, I'm set. A DBA is just a sort of branded forward-facing you. So if there's a lawsuit, the DBA does nothing for you. It just, if they want to get at your assets, they're going to get at your assets. So if you own a home, you have some stock, you have a boat, you inherited whatever, there's a good chance that they'll be able to get right through that DBA to you because the DBA is not a legal entity. It's an alter ego. So if you've been confused on that, or you've learned somewhere along the line that a DBA is an entity or that it'll somehow protect you, it's just wrong. Entities tend to be you're a single sole proprietor, meaning it's just you. It's two or more people. It's a partnership by default. And I think every state in the country says if the two or more people are operating a business together, it is a partnership. Now that's a big deal. Let me take a quick detour on this. If you're in partnership with your band, or you and your producer, if you don't have a band, and you're doing business together, you're putting out projects together, if that other member of your partnership does something that creates a liability, you may be liable for that liability even if you didn't participate in it. Now, of course, there's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of legal hurdles and obstacles and arguments to be made, but my point is most indie artists aren't thinking through the lens of, wow, a partnership, it's cheaper. I don't have to form a corporation or an LLC, so that's great. And it's a legal entity. Not in the way you're thinking. A general partnership by default means that all partners are liable basically for the acts of the other partners. So if your partner, God forbid, causes a crash or builds a stage that ends up collapsing on people, you could be liable for that. So partnerships have some risk. Again, the other videos where we talk about specifically about entity types, that's where you want to dig into that topic. But my point here is if you're going to build a label, you need to think about an entity. Is it a sole proprietorship? Is it a partnership? Is it a corporation? Is it an LLC? You need to know which one and why that entity type works for you. Second thing is to think about contracts. Because a lot of times what happens is indie artists will form a label and they will have, and they say, I'm signed to my label. Well, I don't want to fast forward through all the things that could go wrong with that, but let me ask you a question. If you have a corporation and you're, quote, signed to your own label, where's the contract? Are you under an exclusive recording contract with your corporation? 9 out of 10 times, probably not. And the reason why is because you lack the formality of treating your entity as an actual business, which is a completely separate topic that we get into. That have multiple pieces of content that address treating your work and your art as a business. But for this point, do you have contracts? That's the question. So when you think about starting a label, you think about legal, do you actually have contracts between you and the label, or between the producer and the label, or whoever's working with you and your label? And if not, there's a gaping hole that needs to be resolved. The third area we're going to look at is finances. Now, there's a lot we can also go into on finances, but my two main questions are going to be, who's responsible for the bookkeeping? Is it actually managed? It's not enough to just say, hey, I use QuickBooks at home. I'll just, use QuickBooks to write checks or receive income. Because part of why you want a legal structure and you want financial structure around the label that you're building is because it protects you, it protects your family, it protects your personal assets. If you treat it like a personal piggy bank and you're writing checks from, or you're handling your bookkeeping from the same QuickBooks that you do your family accounting from, it's really easy for a lawyer to say, you know what, you've probably heard this term, but I'm going to pierce the corporate veil. I'm going to sue your corporation, but I'm also going to get to you personally and whatever assets you may have. And I get this all the time. A lot of indie artists are like, "That's who cares, Brock? I live in an apartment, or I live at home with my mom. I don't even have my own car. Who cares if they get to me?" Aside from the fact that it's sort of short-sighted and just bad judgment to make that argument, think about this, and this I think will be the kicker for you. If I get a judgment against you and you live in your mom's basement and you don't have a car, in many states, that judgment will be effective for, let's say, 10 years, and I could renew it. So I can sit on my judgment against you for years while you're trying to build up your art, build up your fan base, try and make your millions and tour the world and all that. And I just wait for the right moment. Then I enforce my judgment. There's a lot of arguments here to be made. You'll hear lawyers talk about statute of limitations and latches and all these different concepts of, well, you've waived your rights basically. My point is, it's possible that somebody will sit on a judgment when you're broke, when you're down and out, and they'll wait until you're not. And if you're planning on always being broke, then you're in the wrong business, right? Well, actually, you're probably in the right business, but you get my point. So you want to be thinking about who's handling the bookkeeping, who's actually handling the financial management, who's marking the income as it comes in. Did I get paid? Did I get my money from YouTube? Are my DSPs paying me through my aggregator? Am I writing the right checks? Did the producer get their royalties? All that kind of stuff. There's somebody that's got to be responsible for that. And if it's you, you should at this point be thinking, okay, I'm an artist, but I'm also a business owner. And usually it starts as sort of, I'm a small business owner, which means you're wearing all the different hats. You're in charge of HR, you're in charge of management and projects and finances and legal. That's all you. So if you're going to start a label, you have to be thinking through the lens, if I'm not taking care of this, no one else is. And that's going to be a problem if I'm not taking full responsibility for what I'm trying to build and leaning into my responsibilities for finances, for bookkeeping, for financial management. If you have a windfall and you get like a runaway hit, do you just take that money and blow it? Go to Vegas? Do you buy new equipment? Do you reinvest it in your business? Do you hire staff? Do you maybe put yourself out on the road and fund the tour? All of those decisions are business decisions. And as indie artists, a lot of times we get used to just making sort of merging personal decisions and business decisions because our life is our art and our art is our life. But if you want to have a successful business, if you're building a label, why would you do that if you're not going to look at this as a business and say, I got my bookkeeping handled. I got my asset management, my financial management handled. I know who takes care of that, even if it's you. Okay.